Welcome back. Prepare yourself because today's letter is going to take you along for a wild ride. It's got everything from sabotage and lies to corruption and cover-ups. Oh yeah. And it's all happening in a gated community filled with multi-million-dollar mansions. Hey everyone. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I fight for people nationwide, helping them understand and exercise their rights against powerful corporations and entities. So if you enjoy holding these giant companies accountable, consider hitting the subscribe button. You can also check out my podcast, which drops new episodes every Wednesday. And now, let's dive into today's insane story. Our story begins in the swanky neighborhood of Lloyd Harbor, Long Island, New York. Picture this: a wealthy community of roughly 400 homes, where the least expensive house on the market will run you around $1.2 million. We're talking sprawling properties with meticulous landscaping and interiors so fancy you'll need a personal chef and a concierge. Think Cliff Notes version of The Sopranos meets Monopoly Box. Now, nestled in the heart of this community is a shared amenity, a pond with a waterfall surrounded by lush greenery. Designed to hold 360,000 gallons of water, it was intended as both an aesthetic centerpiece and a functional storm basin. Basically, it acts like a bathtub for overflow rainwater, preventing it from making its way onto the streets and into the sewers. Fast forward to July 2023 when the area is hit by a deluge, dumping nearly 7 inches of rain within hours. Normally, the pond would happily soak up the excess water, acting as a champ. But alas, it was already brimming with 370,000 gallons, just 10,000 shy of its max capacity. As a result, some of the rainwater bypassed the pond and headed straight for the streets. In no time, residents woke up to waterlogged roads and driveways. And when the sun peeked through the clouds, the true extent of the damage came into view. For 20 homeowners, the damage was catastrophic. Their basements transformed into murky swimming pools. Carpets, furniture, and walls were soaked, electrical systems fried, insulation, sheetrock, and ductwork ruined. We're talking about extensive damage here, the kind that can set you back anywhere between $250,000 and $750,000 per household. Amidst the wreckage, the residents banded together to hold the Lake Club Homeowners Association accountable. They pointed fingers at the HOA's maintenance crew, accusing them of mismanaging the pond's water levels and neglecting routine upkeep. The association had failed to clear debris from the pond's spillway, which should have diverted excess water back into the basin. Instead, the water found its own path, causing havoc. The aftermath was devastating. One resident's basement was filled with 8 feet of water, ruining his gym equipment, a hot tub, a theater system, a safe and irreplaceable family heirlooms. Another homeowner had 6 feet of water in their basement, destroying countless items. For many, their homes became uninhabitable. Some had to move into temporary accommodations, while others relocated to their vacation homes until repairs were completed. You would think that after such a disastrous event, the HOA would be eager to rectify the situation, perhaps issue heartfelt apologies and offer assistance. Right? Well, not exactly. The HOA saw things differently. They brought in their own engineer to conduct an investigation and prepared to hand out blame. Now, typically when an HOA has made a blunder, they often try to hide behind the excuse that they don't have enough cash in the reserves to cover repair bills. In fact, a recent study shows that less than a third of HOAs nationwide have the necessary funds to handle significant disasters. But guess what? This HOA was different. They had plenty of money. They assessed their members a special assessment of $26,000 to carry out the investigation and repair the damage caused by the storm. Yet despite having deep pockets, the HOA wasn't forthcoming with compensation. They adopted a wait-and-see approach, opting not to pay for repairs until they had a clearer picture of who was at fault. As they dug deeper, their focus narrowed down to a few culprits, including a malfunctioning pump and the possibility that someone had manually blocked the flow of water. The engineer's report revealed a shocking detail. The pond's water level had been maintained higher than its design capacity, likely due to a blockage. This finding raised eyebrows. Why on earth would anyone tamper with the pond's water level? And more importantly, who did it, and why? When confronted, the maintenance crew denied wrongdoing. They claimed that keeping the pond fuller was a deliberate choice by the board to enhance its appearance, insisting that no one had tampered with the water level. According to them, the higher water level was a stylistic decision aimed at making the pond look fuller and more visually appealing. To ensure the water flowed correctly, the maintenance crew carried out regular checks using a portable pump. However, during particularly heavy rainfalls, they couldn't always rely on the pump. As a result, the water occasionally spilled over the spillway, causing the backups. Here's the real kicker. When questioned by the engineering team, the board president stayed mum. Despite being in charge of hiring and overseeing the maintenance staff, the board president took a surprising stance. They refused to comment, leaving the entire community in the dark. And here's where the HOA's suspicious behavior reaches a whole new level. After the revelation that the water levels were intentionally kept high, the board started thinking about how to pin the blame on someone. They wanted to find someone to scapegoat, someone to shoulder the responsibility for the damage. Some board members suggested holding the maintenance crew responsible, aiming to shift the financial burden onto them. However, this idea was quickly discarded as the crew had readily admitted to maintaining the water levels as instructed by the board. As a result, the board decided to drop the matter, focusing instead on the actual damage. In an attempt to limit their liability, the board hired an attorney and requested copies of the engineering report from the residents. Now, normally, you would expect a homeowner association to welcome scrutiny. After all, when they make a mistake, it's usually intentional, and they want to cover it up. So they're usually happy to show proof of their great work. But in this case, the HOA was being dodgy. They told the residents to fork over $300 each for a copy of the report, which was supposed to cost $200. But when some residents tried to take the high road and asked for free copies at the next board meeting, the HOA sprung into action. They promptly adjourned the meeting, cutting off any chance of discussion. It was as if they wanted to bury the truth. Residents were baffled by the sudden adjournment, and their confusion only grew when the HOA announced that they would soon be releasing a summary of the engineering report, but not the full report. Everyone was wondering why the HOA was hiding the report. Was it because they didn't want their mistakes exposed? Were they worried that the report would implicate certain individuals or reveal internal issues within the organization? Residents were in the dark. One resident attempted to acquire the report through a Freedom of Information Act request, citing the state's open meetings law. Under this law, meetings of public officials like HOA boards are generally open to the public. However, the HOA's lawyer sent a cease and desist letter, citing the ongoing litigation. However, the HOA never filed a lawsuit, and the cease and desist letter served as a scare tactic to intimidate anyone seeking information. And let's not forget that the HOA is sitting on a war chest of $4 million, meaning they could easily afford to hire lawyers without burdening the homeowners. So what is the HOA hiding in that report? Did they sabotage the system on purpose to save face and point fingers at someone else? Or was it just gross negligence? Maybe they thought it was so cool to have a full pond instead of one that was half dry. They actually pumped water into it themselves, ignoring the warnings that it was already full. Who knows? But they definitely don't want anyone to know. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to share it with your friends. You can also leave me a like and hit the subscribe button if you're not already a part of the crew. Until then, I'll see you guys in my next video. To really understand how this nightmare unfolded, we need to step back and look at the setting. The kind of neighborhood where appearances mean everything. To live in this community, you must pay upwards of $1,200 per month in HOA fees. So let me introduce you to the Homeowner Association. There are 8,000 homes here, but who has the power? 46 elected board members. They're responsible for the finances and the appearance of the entire community. These are the people who pat themselves on the back in quarterly newsletters, praising themselves for maintaining the perfect community. But this is a cooked story. Every year the budget gets bigger, and the appearance of the community gets worse. None of the promised upgrades ever get done. You'll be shocked to know how they keep increasing the HOA fees. This isn't a struggling subdivision or an aging cul-de-sac. This is a gated, private HOA community in New York. Homes here average around $1.2 million, with lush landscaping, carefully manicured lawns, and a board that seems more obsessed with the appearance of wealth than the actual well-being of its residents. The kind of place where the front gates say, "exclusive," and the marketing brochures brag about amenities like decorative ponds, tree-lined streets, and peace of mind. At least, that's what the homeowners thought they were paying for. The trouble started during a freak summer storm. 10 inches of rain fell overnight, not over a week. not spread out over several days. In just one night, the skies opened up and unleashed a torrent that tested every inch of the community's infrastructure. And the infrastructure failed. Water surged through storm drains, streets became rivers, and then the unthinkable happened. The drainage system, the one meant to funnel water away, reversed. Instead of draining water, it pushed it back into the community. Some homes were able to shut off the water coming in. Others weren't so lucky. Homeowners watched in horror as their basements filled. Some, like the original poster of this Reddit story, scrambled all night, scooping water into dozens of plastic storage bins, the kind they had left over from moving. They lost about $5,000 worth of property and had days of cleanup ahead. But for other neighbors, the cost was catastrophic. Entire finished basements were gutted, ceilings collapsed, electrical systems were ruined. One family faced a staggering $250,000 in uninsured damages. This wasn't just bad luck. This wasn't just an act of God. It was a system failure, and almost immediately, residents started asking, why? At first, the HOA brushed it off. They didn't survey the homeowners. They didn't acknowledge responsibility. They treated it like a freak incident, not our problem. But the pressure mounted because homeowners weren't buying it. 20 houses damaged in one night? That doesn't happen if the system is working. Eventually, the HOA brought in an engineering firm. And this wasn't just any firm. It was the same group that had designed the community's original 100-acre site plan 2 decades earlier. If anyone knew how the system was supposed to work, it was them. They had a PowerPoint presentation prepared. It was supposed to clear things up. Instead, it raised more questions. The engineer explained the basic setup. The streets drain into a decorative pond. When the pond fills, the overflow is supposed to go into a sump, which then safely disperses the excess. But here's the catch. Years of deferred and neglected maintenance had reduced the system's capacity. And when the storm hit, the sump overflowed, backing water into the pond, which then forced water back through the street drains. In plain terms, the whole thing ran in reverse. It was bad enough that maintenance had been ignored. But then came the bombshell. The engineer revealed that the pond was being kept at a higher water level than it was designed for. Not just a little higher, enough that it cut into its emergency capacity. Why? Because it looked better. Because some board members, or maybe the property manager, liked the way a fuller pond looked. The engineer didn't outright accuse anyone, but at one point he turned and looked directly at the board president. When asked why the president, sat in silence. No explanation, no denial, just silence. The meeting grew heated. Homeowners were furious. For once, apathy gave way to anger, and the room was filled with twice the usual turnout. It was chaotic, noisy, and tense. But after 2 hours, nothing concrete had changed. The homeowners were no closer to answers. They hadn't even gotten an estimate of how much it would cost to fix the system. Their $20,000 payment was only getting them a summary, not the full report. And that was the last straw. This is where the story transforms from a natural disaster into an HOA nightmare. Because instead of transparency, instead of solutions, the board chose secrecy. Instead of protecting homeowners, they protected themselves. And that decision, the decision to hide the truth, may be just as damaging as the floodwaters that tore through the basements of that luxury New York community. We have no way of knowing what was discussed in that closed-door meeting. Maybe the board did take responsibility. Maybe they paid for repairs without complaint. Maybe they even made good on their promise to release the full report. What we do know is what we were told. The day after that meeting, the board sent out a letter to the homeowners. It said, quote, "The board is pleased to inform the community that it has engaged an engineering firm to prepare a report concerning the storm drainage system and to make recommendations for improvements. The report is expected to be completed within 6 weeks. Unfortunately, due to the volume of engineering data contained in the report, it will not be practical to circulate a copy of the entire report to every homeowner. However, the board will review and discuss the report at a special meeting to be scheduled, and homeowners will have the opportunity to attend that meeting and to ask questions. What happened next? What did the board decide? How did they handle this catastrophe? If you want to find out, you'll have to read part 2 of this story. See you tomorrow. They built a monster. I'm talking about the monster that lurks beneath the surface of suburban life, the one that feeds on apathy and complacency. I'm talking about the monster called the HOA. You thought those monthly fees were for the clubhouse and the pool, but you were wrong. They were for control. Control of your house, your life, your very future. This story came from a Reddit post called, "My Entire Community Flooded. Now my HOA won't tell me why." Our protagonist was living in a beautiful neighborhood with a lovely lake, or so they thought. But one day everything changed. The unthinkable happened. Their entire community flooded. Basements were destroyed. Wiring needed replacing. Some houses were uninhabitable. People lost irreplaceable items. The community reeled, but then a peculiar thing happened. As the floodwaters receded, the mud dried, and the basements were gutted. You'd think the hardest part was over. But for this community, the real storm was just beginning. Because while homeowners scrambled to repair, replace, and rebuild, the HOA board seemed determined to do the opposite of what a governing body is supposed to do. Instead of transparency, they offered silence. Instead of solutions, they offered excuses. And instead of protecting the community, they circled the wagons around themselves. And it all started with one simple question. What happened? The flood was a freak storm. But what actually happened? Which homes were damaged? Who needed help? The board had the answers. The homeowners needed them. But the HOA didn't seem willing to share. The first red flag was their refusal to even survey the community after the flood. Think about that. 20 homes visibly took damage, some catastrophic. But the board wouldn't even ask the simplest question. Who was affected? No outreach, no community-wide assessment, no acknowledgement that this disaster was more than just a freak event. The message was clear. If you got flooded, that's your problem, not ours. But homeowners didn't buy it. They knew something bigger was at play. They pushed for answers, and eventually the board relented and brought in the engineering firm. For a moment, it seemed like progress. But when the representative revealed that the pond was being kept higher than designed, and even hinted that board leadership knew it, the room erupted. That was the spark. Suddenly, the apathetic community wasn't so apathetic anymore. Attendance doubled. Quorum was reached without relying on proxies for the first time in memory. People were showing up, asking questions, holding the board accountable. And the board hated it. The board president's silence spoke louder than words. When the engineer's eyes locked onto him, and the question hung in the air, "Why is the pond overfilled?" He said nothing. Not a denial, not a justification. Just silence. And in that silence, the homeowners heard the truth. Their leadership had no defense. The very next move proved it. The property manager announced that the full 20,000 engineering report, paid for with homeowner dues, would not be released. Only a summary. No timeline. No transparency. Imagine paying for the autopsy of your own community's disaster and being told, "Sorry, you can't see the results. We'll tell you what we want you to know." Homeowners turned to the governing documents for answers. One Reddit commenter, Starfinder14204, pointed out the obvious. If the CCNRs say owners are entitled to HOA records, then the report is theirs. Period. The board doesn't have to publish it, but they can lock it away in a file cabinet and pretend it doesn't exist. It's part of the financial and operational record of the HOA, and legally, that should make it accessible. Another commenter, NegativePresence52, hammered it home. There is a 99.999% probability you are allowed to see the report. It's a common record of the HOA, not related to litigation. They explained that in many states, like Florida, members can walk into the management office and request to see records during reasonable hours. The board can fear lawsuits all they want, but fear isn't a legal shield. And yet, the board stonewalled. So what could homeowners do? Options started to emerge, and Reddit didn't hold back. Garrisord laid it out bluntly. Run for election offering to release the report, find other ways to pressure them to change their mind, or lawyer up. Those were the choices. But even that path wasn't simple. According to the original poster, a new homeowner was supposed to be on the ballot to challenge two incumbents. Then mysteriously, the day before the election, he withdrew. Later, he allegedly told someone that the board had contacted him, told him the incumbents wanted to keep their seats, and convinced him to bow out. If true, that is not just shady, that as a direct attack on the democratic process of the HOA itself. Rigging the vote to keep control, to keep the report buried. And if that sounds like something out of a political scandal, well, HOAs are miniature governments, and the same tactics often apply. Power, secrecy, manipulation of the system, all under the guise of protecting the community. But protect it from what? From homeowners knowing the truth? From lawsuits? From accountability? Reddit's wild and crazy guy cut to the heart of it. Deferred, neglected maintenance contributed or caused the flooding. It was the HOA's responsibility to maintain the drainage system. If that's true, then the board wasn't just hiding negligence. They were hiding liability. And that explains the secrecy. Because once negligence is in writing, once it's confirmed by experts, it becomes Exhibit A in a lawsuit. And lawsuits cost money. Whose money? The HOA's, which means every homeowner's. That's where auto-moderators' comment, oddly enough, gave the board some cover. If the report does show negligence, the board has a fiduciary duty not to release it, as that opens up the association to lawsuits. The association will bear the responsibility entirely, and that includes you personally, since you are the association. Think about that logic. By hiding the report, the board is protecting the community from itself. Because if a lawsuit is filed, the HOA, funded by homeowner dues, pays. If insurance doesn't cover it, everyone pays through special assessments. So, according to this reasoning, better to hide the truth than to risk financial ruin. But, is that really protection? Or is it just self-preservation for the board? Other commenters were less forgiving. Papa Bear 1950 was blunt. You paid for the study, you have a right to see it. Simple as that. George Retire offered the slow burn strategy. Keep showing up to every meeting, keep demanding the report, and vote in new board members who promise transparency. Practical Minded raised another angle. Maybe the report would determine whether damages were caused by the failure of a common element. If so, the HOA's master insurance might be on the hook, which would make hiding it even more problematic. Meanwhile, Nervous Ad 5564 offered a sobering reminder. Even if the report showed negligence, the system was mostly in good order now. The board had recognized the pond problem and fixed it. The most homeowners could do was keep an eye on the water levels going forward. In other words, maybe the cover-up was already complete. And then there's Mapbens, who minimized the whole event. You said, a freak storm. That would tell me no matter how good their drainage is, probably would have happened anyway. Which is exactly the kind of narrative the board would love to embrace. Not our fault. Nothing could have been done. But homeowners know better. They've seen the high water marks on the drainage pipes. They've seen the standing water where there shouldn't be any. They've heard the engineer say that lowering the pond by just 4 inches would have significantly increased capacity. 4 inches. That's all it might have taken to prevent $250,000 in damages. This is the crux of the conflict. The homeowners are trapped in a paradox. They want the truth, but the truth could cost them. They want accountability, but accountability could mean assessments, lawsuits, and fractured relationships with neighbors. The board knows this, and they're using it as a shield. By withholding the report, they're forcing homeowners to make a choice. Accept ignorance and stay safe, or fight for answers and risk financial chaos. And that's the cruelest part of this HOA nightmare. The people who suffered the most, the ones with flooded basements, ruined wiring, destroyed memories, stand to lose again if they push too hard. And the board knows it. I don't know about you, but I love a good mystery. Give me a dark, moody story with twists and turns, and I'm hooked. But sometimes the best mysteries aren't found in fiction. They're found in real-life stories like this one. We've all heard the saying, curiosity killed the cat. But what if curiosity saved the day? When homeowners dug deeper, they uncovered a secret that could have far-reaching consequences. The stakes were high, the risks were real, but the truth was worth it. They're often referred to as the devil, living in a world where nobody's watching. Welcome to our channel. It's me. What happened in that New York neighborhood may feel shocking. A luxury HOA covering up evidence after a catastrophic flood. But the truth is, it's not rare. Across the United States, HOAs have become one of the most controversial forms of local governance. For millions of homeowners, the promise of well-maintained streets and community harmony has turned into something else entirely. A cycle of secrecy, overreach, and, too often, outright abuse. Let's zoom out. Today, more than 74 million Americans live in HOA-governed communities. That's nearly a quarter of the entire U.S. population. And the numbers are growing. Developers love HOAs because they shift the cost of infrastructure and maintenance from municipalities to residents. But while HOAs collect billions of dollars in dues each year, oversight is often weak, and accountability is nearly non-existent. The result? Stories like the New York flood cover-up echo nationwide. Take, for example, the now infamous case in Las Vegas. In 2008, federal investigators uncovered one of the largest HOA corruption scandals in U.S. history. Board members, attorneys, and contractors conspired to rig elections, take over HOA boards, and funnel millions of dollars into fraudulent construction contracts. Homeowners were left with shoddy repairs, inflated bills, and staggering legal costs. More than 40 people were indicted, including judges and lawyers. The FBI called it organized crime hiding in plain sight. Different state, different decade, same pattern. HOA boards treating their fiduciary duty like a private business. Or consider the North Carolina water shutoff case. In 2021, residents at a condo complex in Durham came home to find their water completely turned off. Not because of unpaid bills, but because their HOA had failed to pay the water utility, despite collecting dues from homeowners. Families went days without running water. The board gave no answers, no transparency, and when pressed, blamed accounting errors. To this day, many residents suspect mismanagement, or worse. Sound familiar? A disaster happens, residents suffer, and the HOA either deflects or hides the truth. Even more chilling are the cases where HOA neglect creates life-threatening danger. In Surfside, Florida, the 2021 condo collapse that killed 98 people was preceded by years of ignored engineering reports. Residents had begged the HOA board to take action on structural damage. Meetings were contentious, but repairs were delayed because of the cost. By the time work was scheduled, it was too late. This tragedy is an extreme example, but it underscores the same pattern we see in New York's flooding case. Warnings ignored, reports buried, and homeowners left in the dark until it's too late. Statistics back this up. According to the Community Associations Institute, or CAI, about 50% of HOA-related lawsuits involve failure to maintain common property or infrastructure. Another 30% involve disputes over financial mismanagement or lack of transparency. These aren't rare one-off cases. They're systemic. And when you ask homeowners about their experiences, the frustration is palpable. A 2022 survey found that over 40% of HOA residents believe their board does not act in the best interests of the community. More than a third reported serious conflicts with their HOA within the last 5 years. So why does this keep happening? Part of the reason is legal structure. HOAs operate as private corporations with enormous power over homeowners, but they're rarely subject to the same oversight as public agencies. Board members, often volunteers, may control budgets worth millions of dollars, yet face little accountability. Unless residents band together and sue. Even then, the HOA uses homeowner money to fund its legal defense. It's a stacked deck. And the culture inside many HOAs only amplifies the problem. Think about it. People join boards for all sorts of reasons. Some genuinely want to help, but others crave control. They see the HOA as their personal fiefdom. Combine that with weak state oversight, and you get the perfect breeding ground for cover-ups. The flooding case in New York isn't just about water in basements. It's about a board that thought it could hide information from its own community, the very people footing the bill. And it's far from the only example. In Texas, HOAs have been sued for foreclosing on homes over dues as small as $200. In California, residents fought boards that banned everything from drought-tolerant landscaping to holiday decorations, even when state law allowed them. In Arizona, one HOA racked up nearly $1 million in legal bills fighting its own residents over minor violations, while neglecting critical repairs. Different details, same DNA. abuse of power, secrecy, misplaced priorities, and what makes it worse is how powerless many homeowners feel. Even when they catch their HOA in wrongdoing, the board often hides behind executive session meetings, selective disclosure, or vague references to legal risk. Just like in New York, where a $20,000 engineering report was reduced to a summary that residents weren't even allowed to see. This is why HOA injustice stories resonate so strongly online. Because whether you've personally lived in an HOA or not, the themes are universal. People in power prioritizing image and control over fairness and accountability. The New York case is just one storm in a nationwide flood of HOA dysfunction. And until laws change, until boards are required to operate with transparency, and until residents are given real tools to hold them accountable, these stories will keep repeating. Different states, different disasters, same pattern. The biggest problem with HOAs is the lack of transparency. People in charge don't have to tell you anything. They can hide behind closed doors, make decisions that affect you and your pocketbook, and avoid any responsibility. Now, there are some HOAs doing things right. There are some HOAs that are transparent and honest. But how do you know which ones those are? You don't. It's kind of like buying the lottery ticket. It's a crapshoot. You can spend your whole life paying HOA dues, minding your own business, trying to be a good neighbor and contributing to your community, and never have a problem. Or you can move in next door to the wrong people and watch your life become hell. We've talked to a lot of people who have experienced this firsthand. There was a guy who spent 60 grand to put in a pool in his backyard. His HOA approved it. He had permits, he had everything. He poured all this money into a pool, and then the HOA changed their mind and made him rip it out. There was another woman who spent 20 grand to renovate her kitchen, and she couldn't even paint the cabinets white because it didn't match the HOA guidelines. She had to repaint them the exact color that they were before. The thing about our legal system is, you have to be able to prove wrongdoing. You can't just claim that somebody did something wrong and expect them to admit it and apologize and admit fault. You have to be able to prove it. And if you go up against a wealthy HOA with a large budget and expensive lawyers, chances are you're not going to win. And so people are often left twisting in the wind, dealing with the consequences and trying to figure out what to do next. When you start digging into this story, it becomes pretty clear that there is a massive HOA problem here in the United States. When you look at the number of lawsuits being filed, when you look at the number of people who have reached out to us with their stories, it's clear that something needs to change. And so we're curious to hear from you. Have you had experience with an HOA? What kind of challenges have you faced? Leave your comments below. We'll be reading through them. We've actually done 2 other deep dives on HOA abuse. One was in Austin, Texas, where we looked at several cases of displacement. And then the other was in Florida after the Surfside condo collapse. Both of those videos are linked below. If you enjoy this type of investigative journalism and you'd like to support our work, you can become a member at our website. As a member, you get to watch our videos before they go live. You can see stories like this one in the works before anyone else. We also post exclusive videos and podcasts for our members only. It's a great way to support independent journalism and help us continue reporting on important stories like this one. Our nonprofit newsroom is dedicated to making in-depth journalism freely available to everyone. We believe that access to information is a cornerstone of democracy. Our reporting exposes wrongdoing, deepens understanding, and empowers people to make change. With your support, we can keep our work free for everyone forever. Visit our website to learn more. If you want to read more about this story, you can check out our website. We have a newsletter that delivers the top 3 stories directly to your inbox every week. You can sign up completely for free. Just visit our website or click the link below. Thanks for watching. It's a story that's happened countless times in housing communities across America. A massive rainstorm pours down, but the storm drains can't handle the deluge. Soon, water is backing up and seeping into basements. People are losing irreplaceable items and tens of thousands of dollars worth of structural damage. An investigation follows and the focus quickly narrows down to the homeowners association. Did they know the storm drains couldn't handle major rainfall? Was this recent flooding avoidable? Were homeowners right to complain? And how much should we rely on homeowner associations anyway? In this episode, we'll tackle the tough questions about one of America's most misunderstood institutions. I'm the host, and this is my channel. Before we get into the details of this case, let's take a moment to review the lessons here. Let's start with the big picture. What is a homeowners association, and what should we expect from them? We'll define their authority. Then look at the state-specific rules that apply. Next, we'll examine the HOA's conduct under these standards. Are they potentially liable for what happened? Finally, we'll ask, do we need to rethink how HOAs operate and what powers we give them? Let's begin with the basics. A homeowners association is a private governing body created by a developer and the people who buy properties within the development. Their job is to oversee the shared spaces and enforce the rules. Think of an HOA as a mini-government. They collect fees, create budgets, and impose fines for violations. But unlike governments, they're not accountable through elections. Instead, they're governed by elected boards who serve 2-year terms and represent the interests of the homeowners. It's a lot of power to wield without direct oversight. So we should expect certain things from an HOA. They should act with integrity, enforce rules fairly, and use our money wisely. They should also be transparent, giving us a full accounting of their finances and decision-making. Unfortunately, reality falls short of this ideal. Many HOA boards become insular, making decisions in secret and defying calls for greater openness. Some act arbitrarily, singling out certain residents for harassment. Many lack the foresight to plan for the future, leaving communities vulnerable when disaster strikes. Consider the New York HOA as a prime example. According to multiple sources, a few residents noticed the rising water levels a week before the flood. They alerted the board, but nothing was done. Then came the torrential rains, and the rest became history. There are numerous cases like this where residents allege that HOAs ignored warnings and failed to act. Sometimes they don't want to spend money on repairs. Other times they don't know that a storm drain needs maintenance. Whatever the reason, this pattern of denial is common across the country. So, what recourse do homeowners have when an HOA fails to uphold their end of the bargain? How do we hold them accountable? To answer this question, let's dive into the specifics of HOA regulations in New York. I'll explain the general principles and then break them down into digestible points. First, we'll discuss the fundamental legal obligations of an HOA. Then we'll examine how these rules apply in practice. HOA boards in New York are required to act in good faith, meaning they must act with integrity and not engage in misconduct. In addition, they have a fiduciary duty, which means they must always act in the best interest of the community. To uphold this standard, several measures are in place. Annual audits keep finances in check. Regular elections ensure board accountability. Open meetings allow residents to observe the decision-making process. In fact, New York law mandates that HOA meetings be open unless specifically closed due to legal reasons. Even then, minutes of these closed meetings must be kept. These measures are designed to safeguard the community and ensure that the HOA acts with integrity. However, sometimes these safeguards aren't enough. Take the 2023 flood in New York as an example. Residents knew the storm drains hadn't been maintained, but the HOA board reportedly took no action. This failure raised concerns about whether the board was fulfilling its legal obligation to act in the best interest of the community. The situation became even more worrying when the board refused to release a report suggesting that they knew the system was inadequate. This refusal to be transparent brought the board's integrity into question and left residents wondering why the board had withheld this crucial information. Despite these issues, the board didn't face any immediate consequences. Even if they violated their fiduciary duties, it wouldn't automatically remove them from office. They were still in charge, making decisions about the very systems that failed during the flood. To understand why this happens, let's delve into the HOA's role in maintaining the drainage system. This is another key aspect of their responsibility as outlined in New York law. HOA boards are legally obligated to maintain common areas such as parks and recreational facilities. This means they must make sure these areas are safe for use. For instance, if a tree poses a danger to park visitors, the HOA must take action. Similarly, storm drains are considered common areas. The HOA has a duty to inspect them regularly and perform maintenance as needed. This responsibility extends to planning for extreme weather events. Given the history of flooding in the area, the HOA should have ensured that the drains could handle intense rainfall. Had they done so, the catastrophic damage from the storm might have been mitigated. When we analyze the HOA's actions in light of these responsibilities, some troubling questions arise. Why did the board ignore residents' complaints about the drains? How did they assess the system's capacity? And why were they so secretive about the engineering report? The answers are crucial to understanding whether the HOA fulfilled their legal obligations. Finally, let's address the question of liability. Can homeowners in New York actually hold the HOA accountable if they violate their legal duties? In theory, yes. New York law allows individuals or groups of homeowners to sue HOA boards for failing to meet their responsibilities. However, pursuing such lawsuits can be challenging. HOA boards enjoy significant legal protections. They're shielded by something known as the business judgment rule. This rule prevents board members from being held personally liable for honest mistakes. The idea is to encourage people to serve on HOA boards without fear of excessive legal risk. However, this protection doesn't extend to cases of gross negligence or misconduct. If the board acted in bad faith or violated their fiduciary duties, they could be held liable. In the New York case, residents might argue that the board's refusal to release the engineering report demonstrates a desire to hide their mismanagement of the drains. This concealment, they could claim, shows an intent to avoid accountability, thereby removing the board's legal protections. However, proving such misconduct would be difficult. The board could argue that they withheld the report for strategic reasons, such as protecting the privacy of homeowners. Such claims might stand up in court, especially given the vague language of New York's open meeting law, which allows for the closure of meetings if they involve pending litigation or matters that could harm the association. Therefore, while holding the HOA liable is theoretically possible, practically it's complex and fraught with challenges. The New York case serves as a microcosm of a larger issue plaguing homeowner associations nationwide. They often prioritize aesthetics over safety, overlooking necessary repairs in favor of preserving a manicured appearance. In many communities, board members and property managers are more focused on keeping the grass perfectly cut and the flower beds meticulously maintained than ensuring that essential systems are functional and safe. This lapse in judgment results in dangerous conditions, particularly in regions prone to severe weather. Floods, hurricanes, wildfires, and other disasters become more devastating when HOAs fail to invest in robust preventative measures. Take, for example, the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey in 2017. Many homeowners in Texas found that their flood insurance didn't cover the damage to their landscapes. Yet when they turned to their HOAs for assistance, they were denied help. In some cases, the HOAs argued that the storm-ravaged yards were a violation of community standards, and the homeowners would have to pay hefty fines or face legal action. This callous response not only added financial strain to families already reeling from the hurricane's impact, but also reflected a systemic issue within many HOAs. They were more concerned with upholding superficial aesthetic standards than supporting their community during a time of crisis. This trend is driven by several factors. Firstly, HOAs often struggle with a short-term perspective, failing to allocate funds for costly, but necessary repairs and focusing instead on immediate beautification projects. Secondly, many HOAs lack the expertise to properly assess risks and make informed maintenance decisions. Lastly, a sense of entitlement among some board members contributes to this problem. They see their role as maintaining an exclusive community of pristine properties and fail to recognize the broader responsibility they have towards their constituents. These tendencies aren't merely annoying or aesthetically displeasing. They pose a serious threat to the safety and well-being of residents. When essential systems fail due to neglect, the consequences can be dire. Burst pipes can lead to contaminated water. Fallen trees can cause injuries, and unmaintained roads become hazardous during storms. Moreover, the financial implications of these failures can be devastating. The cost of emergency repairs far exceeds the expense of regular maintenance, and the price of legal action taken by disgruntled homeowners is significantly higher than the cost of settling disputes through negotiation. These considerations raise a crucial question. Is it time to reevaluate the role and powers of homeowner associations? Should we strengthen regulations to ensure they prioritize safety over aesthetics and long-term planning over short-term gains? Or are current systems sufficient and the problems lie elsewhere? As we wrap up this episode, let's leave these questions in your hands. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support our work, please subscribe. Your support helps us continue to deliver high-quality educational content.
Imagine this. You're a homeowner whose basement just flooded during a storm. Water tore up the drywall, soaked your possessions, and left you feeling defeated. As you survey the damage, your neighbor steps in, sympathy on their face, but an odd glint in their eye. Glad it happened to you too, they say. Confused, you realize they're grinning. Turns out both your homes took on water. Welcome to the jungle. In today's story, we'll tackle a problem that plagues many communities: unaccountable leadership. We've all seen the telltale signs. Disagreements over a homeowners association's actions, suspicious denials, and decisions that leave residents scratching their heads. Now picture this. Your association recently hired an engineer to evaluate drainage issues around the neighborhood. You suspect the report reveals problems the HOA wants to sweep under the rug, like faulty French drains or cracks in the pavement. The association says they have no record of such an investigation. What do? Do you press for answers or chalk it up to paranoia? Today, we're diving into a case where residents became suspicious of their HOA's motives after a storm exposed serious drainage flaws. The association denied wrongdoing, pointing to a lack of evidence. But the residents knew something was amiss. They felt like they were dealing with a brick wall, one that offered no explanation for how the water ran rampant through the streets. The strange thing was that multiple neighbors suspected the same issue existed. Many had voiced concerns about poor drainage and shoddy repairs, only to be dismissed by the HOA. However, when Hurricane Ida rolled in, causing unprecedented rainfall, the extent of the damage revealed the gravity of the situation. The deluge exposed cracks in the pavement, broken catch basins, and compromised manholes, leaving residents wondering why their concerns had been ignored for so long. After the storm subsided, the residents approached the HOA seeking answers. They wanted to know why their repeated warnings about the drainage system had fallen on deaf ears. Instead of providing clarity, the board informed them that it had not commissioned a study on the matter, even though a lawyer working on a different case had mentioned having one done. The residents now find themselves at a crossroads, torn between accepting the HOA's denial and pressing for more information. The trouble is that without proof, it's hard to know who to believe. Were the problems caused by inadequate planning, or were they simply a casualty of the storm? This is a predicament we've seen before. There are times when it's difficult to distinguish between those who genuinely have nothing to hide and those who are hiding something. The answer often lies in the details, and we're about to dive deep into one homeowner's experience. But first, let's look at the typical scenario you might encounter in this situation. Here are some common examples of HOA secrecy that mirror our story. Now, let's apply a framework to analyze each aspect of the problem. This approach helps expose the hidden dynamics at play. Let's begin with the legal perspective. A lawyer specializing in community association law could shed light on whether the engineering report is legally accessible to homeowners. Attorney Susan McKay highlights that such reports are typically part of the association's official records, since they're created with homeowner funds. Most states, including New York, grant homeowners the right to review official records. The legal route involves filing a formal demand via certified letter, opening the door to petitioning a court for disclosure if the HOA refuses. However, McKay cautions that legal action may not be the best option, as it could result in financial repercussions for homeowners through special assessments or increased dues. This legal analysis lays the groundwork for understanding the rights and avenues available to homeowners. But to truly grasp the complexity of the situation, we need to consider the engineering perspective. Civil engineer Michael Ramirez would examine the engineering report for insights into the drainage system's capacity, maintenance needs, and design flaws. He might use tools like computer modeling to simulate rainfall and assess the system's performance. By analyzing historical data and comparing it to the storm event in question, Ramirez could determine whether the damage was due to inadequate planning or extreme weather. This engineering analysis provides a critical perspective on the root causes of the flooding. Yet to fully comprehend the situation, we must explore the social dynamics at play. Here, a community management consultant like Dr. Linda Harper can offer valuable insight. Harper would analyze the HOA's governance structure, communication patterns, and decision-making processes to understand how residents' concerns were handled or ignored. She might employ surveys, interviews, and observation to assess the impact of secrecy on community trust. The governance analysis unveils the systemic issues contributing to the breakdown in communication and trust. By weaving together these perspectives, a clearer picture emerges. The HOA's denial takes on new meaning. Perhaps they genuinely lack the report, reflecting a lack of record-keeping rather than outright deception. Or maybe they are hiding something, pointing to a failure in governance or even potential liability. To uncover the truth, residents need to gather evidence, communicate effectively, and engage their community. Consulting professionals can help, but ultimately, it's the residents' collective action that holds the key to unraveling the mystery. So let's unravel this mystery. Imagine yourself as the protagonist in this unfolding drama. You're a resident grappling with unanswered questions and simmering suspicions. Your basement is a testament to the recent storm's fury, damp and disheartening. Trust in the homeowners association, once unwavering, is now shaky. The promise of a pristine living environment seems distant, replaced by doubts about the association's true intentions. Picture this. The scene is set. You're attending an HOA meeting, the air thick with tension. Before the storm, life within the community was serene, but now the tranquil facade has cracked, revealing a landscape of mistrust and apprehension. Each resident is a piece of this puzzle, some harboring anxieties, others skepticism. At the center is the HOA board, seemingly distant and detached. Their silence is deafening, failing to address residents' escalating concerns. This gathering is a microcosm of the community's turmoil, a reflection of the unease that has taken root. As the meeting progresses, the discord becomes palpable. Residents confront the board, demanding answers and accountability. Accusations fly, suspicions intensify, and the board remains evasive. Each unanswered question deepens the chasm of mistrust. This mounting tension underscores the urgency for change. The status quo is unsustainable. The residents are at a pivotal moment. They must decide whether to accept the HOA's explanations, continue questioning their actions, or take more drastic measures. This is the crossroads where doubt and determination converge. The stage is set for a showdown between residents and the HOA, a battle not just for transparency, but for the very soul of their community. The quiet drama of suburbia is about to turn up the heat. Will the residents unite, demanding answers and accountability, or will they succumb to the pressure of maintaining harmony within the community? Stay tuned to find out. Now let's pull back the curtain and analyze what's really happening in this HOA drama. From a legal standpoint, the homeowners have the right to review the report, but taking legal action could backfire financially. The engineering report could reveal issues like flawed designs or neglected maintenance, shedding light on the flooding's root causes. But the HOA's secrecy may also stem from simple record-keeping lapses. Governance expert Dr. Linda Harper points to a breakdown in communication and trust as the core issues. The residents' suspicions reflect a deeper malaise within the community, a clash between those seeking transparency and those valuing harmony. The power dynamics are clear. The HOA holds most of the cards, but residents' collective action may be their most potent tool. Consulting experts, like attorneys, engineers, and governance specialists, can help navigate this complex web, but it's the community's engagement that will drive meaningful change. Ultimately, this unfolding drama is not just about one flooded basement. It's a microcosm of the challenges facing modern communities. As we watch this story evolve, remember that real-life situations are rarely black and white. The HOA's intentions may not be malicious, but their actions are eroding trust. Whether this story ends in compromise, confrontation, or change, one thing is clear. The path forward requires residents to confront uncomfortable truths and work towards solutions together. But how exactly do you confront an HOA, especially when faced with legal complexities and potential financial repercussions? We've got you covered. Check out the linked video where expert strategies are laid out. Don't forget to subscribe to get notified when we publish new videos. And if you find this content valuable, please share for more insightful tips. Thanks for watching.
This is a place where all the houses look like they just popped out of a design magazine, manicured lawns, gleaming facades, the kind of place where it's hard to imagine anything bad happening. Except a few months ago, this picture-perfect community turned into a disaster zone. Homes were flooded, dreams were drowned, and finger-pointing started almost immediately. So what really happened here, and why does it matter to you? On Memorial Day weekend of 2023, 10 inches of rain fell on this Long Island community. That's less than what falls in most of Florida during an entire year. But here, it caused chaos. Basements flooded, sewage backed up, belongings were ruined. In this case, Mother Nature didn't just unleash her fury. She unleashed an amount of water that overwhelmed decades of questionable decisions. And those decisions start at the top, with the HOA board. See, this isn't just a typical neighborhood. It's Cedar Creek Park. It's a private community of 650 homes where a homeowners association holds the keys to both the neighborhood's charm and its security. You have to get in through the gates, and once you do, you're greeted by meandering paths, gazebos, and sparkling ponds. It's a postcard come to life. Except those ponds have a dark side. Take a closer look. Do you see any drains or pipes? There aren't any. This pond is filled by rainfall alone. Why? Well, because this HOA has spent years filling it in, piling rocks and dirt to make it look bigger, thicker, more impressive. But that makes it more like a lake, meaning when the rains came, it had nowhere to go. All that water had to go somewhere. And in this case, it went backward. It forced its way through cracks in the pavement, burst through underground pipes, and flowed in the opposite direction, back into people's homes. When Sarah Springsteen's home flooded, she thought her insurance would cover it. But then she got hit with an additional $46,000 bill from her own HOA. I was devastated, she says. I didn't sleep for 2 weeks. She wasn't alone. Some families lost hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of personal property. Others watched their entire lives get sucked into a swirling drain. But even as residents were wading through knee-deep water, the board was already looking for answers. They hired an engineering firm to figure out what went wrong. And the report they produced paints a clear picture. Years of infilling had blocked natural drainage patterns, turning a light rainfall into a deluge. Now, normally, that's exactly the kind of information a board should share. After all, this report was paid for by homeowners. But instead of posting it online or handing it out at a meeting, the board tucked it away in a binder. They wouldn't tell anyone about it, not the residents, not the media, not even the investigators from the town council. It was as if they wanted the truth to disappear. So why wouldn't they share what went wrong? Well, that's the million-dollar question. Or maybe it's the $6 million question, since that's how much all the claims will cost the HOA. But beyond dollars and cents, there seems to be a deeper motive. Over the past decade, this board has repeatedly overruled residents. They ignored pleas to repair crumbling driveways. They stalled on safety upgrades. They even rejected a new playground because it would make noise. But they weren't elected by popular vote. They were put in place by wealthy investors who bought enough homes to stack the deck. And now, they wield that power to keep residents in the dark. And when the flood came, they used the same tactics. At the first meeting after the disaster, the board refused to answer questions. They adjourned in record time, then locked the doors to prevent discussion. That meant residents had no choice but to fight back. And this wasn't your average neighborhood brawl. These homeowners took their case to court, suing the board for damages. Then they began a grassroots campaign to take over the elections. Normally, HOA elections are boring. Voter turnout is usually less than 10%. But this time, things were different. Frustrated residents campaigned across the community, going door to door and urging people to register and vote. As a result, voter turnout spiked to nearly 60%. Why such passion? Well, for many of these families, this wasn't just about water damage or insurance claims. It was about being ignored for years. about watching their neighborhood decline while paying some of the highest HOA fees in the nation. And when the voting ended, the results were clear. The board was voted out, but the battle isn't over yet. The new board will have to deal with millions of dollars in claims. They'll also have to clean up years of neglect, repave streets, and restore eroded drainage systems. In other words, they'll be fixing problems that the old board should have addressed long ago. But more important than any financial burden is the erosion of trust. The board spent years blocking access to critical information. They kept residents out of meetings, stalled on repairs, and refused to answer questions. In fact, they fought tooth and nail to keep the very report that revealed their mistakes buried. And if that's not betrayals, I don't know what is. It's as if the people entrusted with protecting this community saw danger on the horizon, and instead of sounding the alarm, they looked the other way. Now, that might seem like an isolated incident, a local squabble over lawn ornaments gone awry. But it's not. It's a stark reminder of how vulnerable we are when we hand our communities over to a handful of people with too much power and too little oversight. In the US, roughly 1 in 5 homeowners belongs to an HOA. Most of us join voluntarily. We sign a document giving the HOA control over everything from our front stoop to our garbage cans. And normally that's a good thing. An HOA can enforce rules, protect property values, and handle tedious details so we don't have to. But for that to work, the HOA needs to be accountable, transparent, and fair. But too often they're not. Here's how common HOA abuses of power are. 2/3 of homeowners say they've experienced a problem with theirs. Only 39% of HOAs provide regular updates. 40% of boards won't allow audio recordings of meetings. And 22% limit the time a resident can speak at a meeting to just 1 minute. The bottom line, if you live in an HOA, you don't just buy a home, you buy into a political system. And that means having a say in how it's run. It means getting answers and appealing decisions. It means understanding the finances and knowing that someone is looking out for your interests. Because think about it. If a company treated you this way, you'd switch providers. If a landlord ignored maintenance requests, you'd find somewhere else to rent. But with an HOA, you're stuck. You're locked in for the long haul. So it's more important than ever that the people you're stuck with are looking out for you. And if they're not, you need to know 3 ways to hold them accountable. First, review your HOA documents, especially the bylaws. They spell out how everything operates, including how you can call for a vote, how to challenge a decision, or how to remove a board member. Second, attend every meeting, whether in person or virtually. Don't be satisfied with minutes or summaries. Listen for yourself, ask questions, and see if there are signs of trouble. Third, rally your neighbors. You don't have to go it alone. If you spot a problem, talk to your friends, check the CC&Rs, and call a meeting. You may be surprised how widespread the concerns are. In a community of hundreds or even thousands of homes, just a few people speaking up isn't enough. You need a movement. You need to rally your neighbors to make change. And it starts with a simple conversation. After all, it's your money, your time, and your community. And don't forget, you don't have to be the loudest voice to be heard. You just have to be the most persistent. Keep showing up, keep asking questions, and keep voting until you get the answers and the action you deserve. In a world where it feels like everyone's yelling, sometimes the quietest voices can be the strongest. This is what happens when you give power to the few and silence to the many. But it doesn't have to be this way. Communities can be safe, well-maintained, and welcoming without secrecy, without bullying, and without lies. It just takes a few good conversations and a lot of persistence. If you've enjoyed this video, please remember to subscribe for more stories like this one. Thank you for watching.